Hi, welcome to the third option. We are Rick and Judi Manis. I'm the Rick part, and this is
The Judy
the
part.
Judi part. And today we've got something that's very special that we want to share with you. It's my particular journey or story of racism and what God has done in that so far.
We've been doing a series on the spirit of understanding. So, the title of this episode is Understanding and Empathy, a story about racism. And this is your story.
Yeah, because we've been talking about how understanding takes care of it drives away the contempt. It drives away the ideas that we have that make us, we try to simplify people that we don't understand or that we don't agree with. And if you watch the last episode or listen to the last episode, we were talking about the spirit of understanding and how uh, it's it's a facet of God's love. And if you're growing in the love of God, then these things will happen to you. Certain works will happen in your heart. You will gain understanding that will give you empathy for people that maybe you did not once have. And in my situation, I was raised in a home that they regularly used the N word. They were a good degree racist, you would say. I was raised in that. I heard derogatory terms for Black people a lot. I used them. I'd hear my parents use them. I heard, and basically in my neighborhood, all the kids I knew and their parents. It seemed that they all spoke and thought that way with these racist attitudes. And so I had that, but that's something that's learned, and I know it was because I didn't have that when I was very young. I do remember being 5 years old, and my best friend in the neighborhood was a Black boy that was the same age as I was. And one day when I went to his house, to his door, he let me know that he couldn't come out and play with me anymore, and he wasn't allowed to. And so sometime later, I ran into him and I said, "How come you can't play with me?" He said it was because I called him the N word. And in my mind, I didn't think anything about that. I just said, "Well, that's what you are." He said, "No, and we don't like it when you call us that." And so I remember talking to my mom about it, and I said, "Did you know that they don't like you to call them that name, that word?" And she said, "Yeah, you shouldn't do that." And I was confused because I'd heard that in my house a lot. So I don't believe that I had that type of racism naturally, but I was raised in surroundings that had that. And so I grew up having that. My friends all talked the same way. And so what we had was this idea that they were inferior in some way. And that was something that was learned. I remember the first time my dad brought a coworker home that was Black into our house. And I just remember, you know, feeling really funny about that. I couldn't believe that there was a Black person in my house. That's the groundwork for the story. This is the way that I grew up. And then it went from just feeling maybe that we were superior to another group of people, but it became hate because later on in my teenage years, my friend and I were walking through a parking lot, and a carload of young Black guys came out and started beating on us, and then drove off. And so I had this rage, I had this hatred toward basically the whole race. And so I'm living with that.
You were also living in the time where they were desegregating schools, like they
There was
were
a lot of trouble.
bringing in,
Yeah. And
and the black guys didn't want to be there, and the white guys didn't want. It was a very tense
it was a tense situation. There was
time.
lots of fights. Every day there'd be fights in the school. It didn't seem like the teachers knew how to handle things. And it was, I would bring a knife to school. I got somebody actually to find me a switchblade knife, to buy one for me, and carried that in school. And this was like in what they called junior high back then. And so anyway, had that whole thing going. Well, I become a Christian later on, and that really did something to change a lot about it. But that's not the end of my story, because it goes on. But that part of it really did a big change. The whole concept of Christianity and what I could see in God's word. I did believe technically that all men were created equal. I did believed that that's the way that everybody needed to be treated, with fairness and love and so on. And so it changed me. I was changed in a lot of ways. In fact, the church that I pastored, intentionally, I wanted it to be an interracial church. And so we had a very good mix. I would say we were about a third black, a third white, and a third brown in that church. And we really felt like we loved each other. We felt like there was a lot of love in that situation. We didn't talk about any of the social issues or political issues about it or anything. In fact, I probably, if it ever came up, I probably kind of squashed it because I didn't want it to be about that. I didn't think it was important. I figured that, we had a civil rights bill passed back in '64. We got the laws that were necessary. Suck it up and compete and work hard and, use the opportunities you have. And so there was a lot of friendships. There was love that was happening, but I didn't have an empathy for some of the things that they were feeling, and some of the causes that were going on in the country. And sometimes it would come up, just in conversations, and I felt like it was their problem. I felt like, well, they're still being oversensitive. It's probably part of their culture. They're probably taught to be that way, and they don't know any better. And there again, in my mind, get over it was sort of my attitude about it. I figured, like, hey, I came up from nothing. I worked hard, da, da, da. And so I didn't have empathy, and I did not have understanding into what it was actually like to be a black person, and never actually will 100%, never can, but had very little, honestly. I thought it was just good enough to just walk in love and treat people, everybody the same, treat people good. But I felt like they sometimes, some of the black folks would have a bitterness about them because some of the things that went on socially in our country and in the world. Anyway, a few years ago, um, there was the George Floyd situation where the man was killed. He was, I guess, essentially strangled during being handled by police, and he died. And there was outrage over that, and it was sad, and it was emotional. And we had the guy who was a pastor of our church at that time. I remember him challenging the congregation to talk to people that are different from you. Get another view on it. Get a different perspective than your own, and let's try to understand each other. I thought that was a brilliant thing. You and I both did, and we took it to heart, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
We decided that we were going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I noticed in the days that followed, we did. I noticed you really did. You were pretty intentional about it. And I would see us when we would be out running errands, and you would see someone, you would approach them, even if they were a stranger, and you would talk to them and ask them about,
Mm-hmm.
how do you feel? And, and I
I,
was doing the same thing.
yeah, I think that day it was such a hot topic that everybody knew about it.
You
So
could talk about it.
you could ask
Right.
questions and just say, from your perspective, how do you see this, and
Yeah.
how are you feeling about
And
all
what
of this?
what we learned was, with talking, we got a better perspective. We could began to understand, and you may have been ahead of me in this, but I can speak for myself, saying I began to understand more that I really didn't understand what it was like for them
Mm-hmm.
to be black. I did not have their same story. I didn't deal with some of the day-to-day things, even the subtle things sometimes, sometimes major things, but I didn't deal with the same. I had my own issues, and I knew they had issues, but I thought, hey, we all got issues. Let's get over it, and let's work hard and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't understand their issues, that they went through things, that they also had hard things to deal with, like I did, but they had the added layer of the racism that
Mm-hmm.
was still prevalent. And I remember in talking to one particular person who was a stranger about it, and realizing that, it wasn't enough to have the good laws passed in the civil rights movement, that hearts needed to be changed, because there was still oppressiveness in people's hearts. There was still contempt in people's hearts, and that's what they were feeling was happening when some of these people who were arrested were getting handled so roughly and sometimes dying. And in my mind, sometimes I would think, well, if you don't break the law, then you're not in that situation. But someone pointed out, well, you can break the law and be of another race, and you don't have that situation happen as often, percentage wise. So all these things were coming out. And what I want to say is, we're doing this not to try to persuade somebody to take a side or another, or to even change your side that you may be taking on this issue. That's not really the point. The point we're talking about is understanding. And what I want to bring out is that I began to realize that there were some things I did not understand that I thought I understood. I read a quote this morning where someone said something like, "The intelligent man is not the one that knows a lot about everything. He's the one who challenges everything he knows." And there's a light that comes into you when you begin to do that,
Mm.
instead of having this pride that seems like so many of us have, like, no, I know the truth because it's what I think.
Mhm.
And whatever I happen to think, it's the superior thing, it's the correct thing, it's the right thing. And humility says there's so much that we don't know. And so, anyway, I began to see that I have never walked in the shoes of a Black person. And I began to have empathy. I began to have a little more understanding that this is something that I don't really understand, but this is something I can have compassion for because it is a reality. That's what I really got out of it, was that
Mhm.
this is not an imagination. There was a reality
Mhm.
of some things that were going on. So it began to do something in my heart where I began to change,
Mm.
and it's a beautiful thing. And I like telling the story because it went from where I was in my young beginning. It got much better as a Christian when I had the core beliefs about such things correct, but it went even deeper to give me empathy and understanding,
Mhm.
to where I don't have the same knee-jerk reactions to where I used to just say, "Oh, get over it." And I don't do as easily try to put people in a simplified box and saying, well, they're just bitter people, or they're just not thinking it through, or they're just ignorant of some things. And if they would think like I do, everything would be okay.
Mm.
And when I think of that now, that's such a silly way to be. But there's so much that all of us don't understand
Mm.
about a number of things. And we're all affected by our experiences and by our traditions, and we come to our conclusions of things honestly. But it's a beautiful thing for us to understand that we don't understand everything, and because we don't understand, we keep a separation thing, and we can even have a contempt, and our heart is not soft towards people because we see things done that we don't understand, that we don't like, and maybe they're not even right, maybe it's not even good. Some of the things, people will argue about, well, some of the rioting and the destruction that happens, and there's even killing sometimes in some of the protesting, and so some of those things, yeah, it would be hard to say that they're good and right. And you don't have to condone everything, certainly don't have to condone killing.
Mhm.
That's when someone does a killing in the name of protest, but
But you might be able to see where the pain
the
is
pain,
coming from.
the pain,
And pain compels us to do some pretty hurtful things, and not to say that that's right, but that's maybe the source of it. And I think grace teaches us empathy. And Jesus himself, in his life and in the way he interacted with people, demonstrated an empathy towards the ones who were like the outsiders, or it was just accepted that they were less than women,
Samaritans, which was a
Samar-
racial thing.
yeah, Samaritans, demoniac.
Samaritans was also a religious thing
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you're watching him kind of step outside the bounds of tradition and saying, wait, I want to question this. Is this really? I don't think Jesus was questioning it, but we can question it. Like,
but he
is
would
this?
use questions. He would pose questions, right,
That's
to
true.
people.
But is this really the way we want to proceed? I think Jesus's whole life is he brought a new understanding of even God the
He
Father,
brought
because
information
yeah,
and new information.
they had traditions down that God was like the people who like me, and I hate the people that don't like me. And Jesus came and he said that they loved all, not just the ones that like us. He said to love our enemies and not just our friends, because in the world system or your flesh, everybody does that.
Right.
But it's a little added thing that with God and with the Spirit in us, that we're able to have I think it begins with empathy and understanding, and it allows us to love people in a way that accepts them as they
It
are.
does. And I say it starts with understanding God in a better light. Jesus gave us information about the Father that when we receive that, when we believe that, it draws us to a sense of feeling near to him. Whereas before, if you don't have an understanding of grace, you feel like there are things that can be buffers between you and the best of God. And when you look at what Jesus, the information that the gospel gives and that the life of Jesus and the death of Jesus gives, you see the buffer removed. And so the separation is removed in that having more understanding of God's love and his grace. And it allows us to understand us more and have empathy for ourselves. Not that we want to go out and be evil,
Yeah,
do evil. In fact, we want the opposite. Everybody
right.
I've ever met, but we may be bound up by things, but we can have empathy for ourselves because we understand God does. God may not condone everything I do, but he understands and he loves me. And God so loved the world. And then that begins to flow out to other people. And so what we want to do is be humble enough to receive information. And I think that's a big problem we have in the world today is people, they don't want to receive information that goes against something that they already think. This is why people on one side of a political spectrum will only listen to a certain news channel and vice versa on the other side. They listen to just a certain, they don't want to hear what the others are saying much. In fact, they just say they're lying.
Hmm.
And while there is bias in reporting on both sides, it's still a good thing to get understanding of
Yeah.
people.
And I think that understanding comes outside of a group. It
You
has
have
to
to get out of your
be,
group.
yeah, well, it has to be personal
Yep.
conversation rather than this is what the group thinks
Yep.
and then I can just judge the group. You
Hmm.
have to kind of talk to an individual and like really hear their stories and their perspective. And that will help make it understandable. I don't know what the word is, but like make it connect for you to have a connection because you're dealing with a human being who has thoughts and experiences, traditions just like you do, but it's coming from a different place. I mean, I would say, even in my own family, there were 5 kids. We have 5 very different perspectives on our growing up years. We have 5 very unique perspectives, and we can get upset with each other because we're seeing things different, or you can kind of have, and I think it's better done one on one, where you can kind of ask questions or be curious in a way that you're really seeking understanding, and you can start to see, oh, I can see that from that their perspective, or even say, I can see that in myself,
Yeah,
like I
that
can
happens.
see that. Yeah.
Here's an example of that is when I was pastoring a church back in the 90s. At that particular time, I would say that I was very, I was very, just very vocal and staunch about the abortion issue. And
Hmm.
just, it was very black and white. It was just, there's good and there's evil. But then in counseling, you talk to a lot of people in different situations and talking to, a few different women that would bare their soul about their abortion experience or even considering that and talking to them face to face and seeing them as a human, empathy began to happen. And I just thought, you know what? This is more complex than I have made it out to be. Now, if you want to stand back and say, well, isn't it right or wrong? Then you can come up with your answer on that. But what I'm saying is that we don't want to be void of empathy and understanding. And I'm talking about really having it where you feel it in your heart, not just in a way where
Theoretical
in a theoretical
way.
way
Yeah.
where it's like, well, I love them, so I tell them the truth. You hear
Yeah.
that, and that hurts me so much when I hear Christians say that, but they don't have understanding. They
Hmm.
see one facet from their position, and they don't know what God knows. And we mentioned Jesus last time hanging on the cross in our last episode, how he was hanging on the cross, and he had understanding of what these people were doing that hung him on the cross. Now we can say, well, yeah, they were just jealous and they were proud and they were doing evil because they were selfish. All that was in there. But beyond that, Jesus saw the humanity, saw the fear, the insecurity, the shame, the nakedness, all of that. And he came to seek and to save all of us that were lost. And he said,
Including them.
including them. So he said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Now, they thought they knew. They got together and talked it out and thought they were really smart and thought that they had the right angle on it and the right answers.
Mhm.
But Jesus said, they don't know. They're void of understanding. And then those of us that just, we quickly condemn people. We're probably void of understanding in some way, because if we weren't, we would see things more like Jesus does, who says, I didn't come to condemn anybody. He came with, the Bible says it in Isaiah 11, that he was clothed with the Holy Spirit that had the spirit of wisdom and the spirit of understanding.
Mhm.
And he understood, and he went beyond the traditions and the things that cause us to just try to see that we want to see things in black and white. I think because there's a security in that, or a sense of security in that. But while we can do that, the whole point of this is to be connected, because we don't want to violate our core purpose. We don't feel good inside of us when we have a disconnect between the people. And another thing is that it's so easy to separate yourself from a group of people. When you classify people as groups, and like you were saying a while ago, that when you see people as individuals, so we look at people as issues sometimes. And, like I can
Mhm.
take the abortion issue, and it's just, just very black and white. But beyond that, there's a person that's struggling and dealing with something that
Mhm.
you don't have to deal with,
Mhm.
maybe, and so you're not going to completely understand the feelings and the situation and the struggle that goes on, but you can have empathy for it. You can have some understanding of the human condition, and that's a facet of God's love, that as we grow in that, we'll get along a whole lot better. This
Mhm.
country can heal with
Mhm.
that. The world can heal. So it doesn't always have to be nation against nation, because wars are come because two people think they're right, two groups think they're right, and they don't understand the other one. As far as they're concerned, the other one is just being evil, and they see it that way. So there's no understanding, and until we come to understanding, we just keep repeating the same
Yeah,
things
we keep
again and
hurting
again.
each
The
other.
spirit of understanding, the Holy Spirit, is here with us, and I guess we wanted to talk about this because we wanted to open up the idea
Mhm.
of understanding to people, and say that understanding is something that's of God. And understanding, if the information that you have is not drawing you nearer, but it's pushing you further away from people, then it's not the spirit of understanding
Mhm.
that God has. Okay, how are we going to wrap this talk up?
Well,
I want to say this, that again, talking about the George Floyd thing, and talking to people about that, one of the things that I gained from that was, they were, at the time, they were wearing T-shirts and saying things and holding up signs to say, "I can't breathe."
yeah.
And that, I can say, by talking to people, I felt that for them. I
Uh-huh.
felt like I get it, because I've had other situations in my own life where I felt like I can't breathe. I don't have room or hope here. Like,
Yeah.
and so I can relate in that sense. And for them to feel like that about the situation, just because they look a certain way, I had empathy for that. And I thought, and that changed me. The
Uh,
spirit of understanding changes us from the inside. And aren't we tired of the contempt? Aren't
mhm.
we? I mean, where does it all end with people, just
And
groups
does
of
it
people hating other groups?
and does it feel good inside of you, inside of me, that feeling of like, I don't like them, I don't want to be around them? That doesn't feel like love. Like it doesn't feel like the
Right.
child of God that I was, that is my most authentic self, that I was created to be. Like it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And you know what? There will be people that watch this that are they're gonna watch this, and they're gonna come to the conclusion that, but guys, that's not, right is right and wrong is wrong, and we have to, they're going to take that stand on it. And what I want to say about that is, I understand that too. So we don't have to condemn that. If
Yeah.
someone doesn't agree, if doesn't see what we're talking about, and they say, no, I don't agree with you guys, because I believe that right is right and wrong is wrong, and we just need to take those stands, and they think that what we're talking about is too compromising or namby-pamby or something. And if that's what they think, then we don't have to condemn them either, because I understand that,
Uh-huh.
because I've had that perspective.
Yeah.
So
And
I don't
you,
condemn people for
yeah,
things that I have done myself because I understand it. I was doing the best I could.
yeah, yeah. That's what I was going to say. You can only see what you can
Mhm.
see. So if you can't see it, that's, I mean, that's where
Yeah,
you're at, and
right.
that's okay.
And they're still worthy of love
Hmm.
because they, no matter, we're all in some degrees of ignorance in whatever,
But
and we're all worthy of that love.
I will say that I've never seen contempt change the heart of someone else.
Ever.
I've seen
Never.
laws change, but hearts don't change by contempt or ridicule or harsh.
Comes by the Spirit of God. Comes
Hmm.
by love.
Yeah.
And a a big part of the good news of our gospel, our good news, is that the love of God has been poured in our hearts by the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
And just like that love did a big change, it did a big, I took a big leap as far as the racial thing went. But from that point, there was still more learning and understanding that I didn't even know that I needed. But because you're blinded, you're ignorant, you're in a
Hmm.
relative darkness. But there's always more understanding, and the more understanding we get, the more love we have, the more compassion, mercy, and empathy that we have for other people of this human condition that we're sharing with each
Hmm.
other.
Hmm.
And that's where all this is going. It's all, we started with God, come from God who is love, and we're moving into that love more and more and more. And that's our hope, and that's the good thing.
Yeah. So we hope you enjoyed this. It's a story of
Racism.
learning. Well, I was going to say learning empathy, growing in understanding and empathy in this one particular area. And it's something that is prevalent in our country, just the way our country was formed. And I think it's something worthy that we all can look at in ourselves and just be curious, like, what am I thinking about this and how do I think on this?
And the changes that happen are just beautiful. That's why
Yeah.
we want to share them. In fact, to give you a little clue, our next episode have another story about homophobia. That's a flashpoint, so you'll want to watch that one or tell people about that one.
So if you like the episode, give us a thumbs up. If you wanted to talk further about it, you can reach out to us on our social media platforms or on our website is rickmanis.com. We have a contact form there and you are free to converse with us there. And yeah, we hope this has been just something to think about, something to ponder and consider. Have a great day.
In all you're getting, get understanding.
Is that Proverbs? Proverbs?
Proverbs.